to begin with, it is not per se illegal. It's just not authorized, so to speak, that the Chief Justice has those powers, or the court as a Supreme Court has those powers to discipline advocates in the course of what they do in appearing before them. And that's why you will see that the letter that actually quote-unquote bans Ahmed Nassir has to refer to a case that was before the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, that case was not before the Supreme Court at the time of CJ Mother Koome, and so it appears to be just something that they have looked for to try and justify their decision. Then at the second instance, so they would have that power to discipline, but basically on the proceedings before them and on the advocate. So there are 3 or 4 instances in which an advocate can actually be barred by a high court or be denied audience. Right. What we call it is being denied audience. You can have conflict of interest. We can have that the advocate with one of the judges or with the case in question, they have some entanglement that would otherwise make it impossible to appear before court. Then we would have professional misconduct, which is what they are claiming. We would also have non-disqualification. You might be having some of your documents that are not proper. You might not be having a practicing certificate for this year, so those would bar you from appearing before the court. Every Kenyan has a right to a fair hearing. So the Supreme Court would have that power to discipline you when you go wrong or when you're in contempt of court. The court tells you this and you do the other. So what they have been referring to is a Supreme Court case that started in 2012. There were 2 suicide bombers that were arrested, taken through the High Court and gone all the way to the Supreme Court. But Ahmed Nassir decided to quote-unquote attack the Supreme Court in his submissions, and they asked him to withdraw those remarks, but he refused to. So they gave him a caution. In as much as he's my senior, I do disagree with the decision to go to the East African Court of Justice, and I take the view that this matter should actually be taken to the High Court. I will remind you that in 2022, when we were having the presidential petition election, CJ Koome gave out rules that said that the advocates or any advocate cannot comment or supposed to be making analysis of the proceedings at the Supreme Court during the presidential election during that time. And an advocate who's actually vying in this year's election, called George Omwansa, took the CJ to the High Court and said that those regulations were unconstitutional, and the High Court agreed with him and quashed those regulations. That's why you would see during the time of the presidential petition, you would call us advocates to TV stations, and we would come and discuss what is being presented, what is happening, and that is where all that began. And so in the same sense, I believe that the same issue with Ahmed Nassir should be taken to the High Court, because the High Court has original jurisdiction on matters of the Constitution and on matters of interpretation of the law.
So are we saying then that he doesn't have a case to take to the...
He might have, but at this stage it's just clout. It makes more sense to go to ESCJ when you fight with a Chief Justice in your country. But legally and constitutionally speaking, we should start at the High Court. This thing needs to be discussed, because it's not just about Ahmed Nassir. That means that even the people who have consumer rights, you have a right to choose your own advocate. You have a right to be represented by whoever you want. So that actually interferes with your right if you wanted to be represented by Ahmed Nassir. It is not just about him. There are people who are in his farm. There are people who would like to hold brief for him in the Supreme Court, because he still has matters in the Supreme Court. So you can't hold brief. What they are saying, what in actual sense they are saying, is that the clients should drop Ahmed Nassir and look for another advocate, which is actually an affront to our Constitution from the whole beginning.
Right, that is a conversation I had with Robin Karani. Conversation that is developing. We'll be keeping you updated how it unveils.